The New York Mets continue to struggle to find their footing. We're going to try to figure out what is going on with this team as we talk here tonight. Good evening, everybody. My name is Craig. Welcome to MetropoliFins. We're YouTube's smallest New York Mets and Miami Dolphins channel. We're going to be bringing you the coverage, everything that you need to know about the New York Mets tonight. They are coming off a 9-1 loss, an absolute demolition, a plundering by the Pirates here tonight. David Peterson, who looked like he was getting back on track. His last couple of starts completely fell apart, and it was just not pretty. The only highlight that you really have for the game today is Juan Soto's 20th home run of the season. He is pushing to get that all-star spot, that starter all-star spot in the outfield. You currently have three Mets who are in the final vote off, shall we say. So Pete Alonso versus Freddie Freeman at first base, and then Francisco Lindor versus Mookie Betts at shortstop, and then Soto with about five other guys, I believe, are all going for outfield starting spots. But that's it. That was the highlight of the night. So it is definitely one of those nights. If you did not catch the game, you did not miss much. You can see on the screen it's just 9-1. David Peterson was just outmatched from the very beginning. And this pitching staff, which had been so rock solid for us for so much of the season, is just seemingly every day taking another hit or two as we completely go through. Griffin Canning is out for the season. Okay, so he is out for the season. He had a great year, but it's over. Like that's it. There's no coming back. There's no Griffin Canning. We'll see you in September. We'll see you in August. And so right as we get reinforcements and Frankie Montas coming back and actually doing pretty well in his first start back, then all of a sudden it's like, okay, well now we lose another starting pitcher. Of course, Kodai Senga is still on the injured list. Tyler McGill is on the injured list. You just got all these things that are going on here, and it's um, so what is going on? What is going on with this Mets team? And is it panic time? Is it not? No, it is definitely not panic time, in my opinion. There is still a lot of baseball to be played. And so I would not be in this situation where you're like, oh my goodness, everything is over. The season is ruined. It's certainly not that. The Mets are still battling. If the Phillies lose tonight, the Mets will still be in first place in the National League East. So it is not one of those situations where it's complete chaos. But it is still a lot of chaos, and there's a lot of stuff that Mets need to be thinking about. We've been talking on this channel a lot during our live streams about how the Mets pitching staff was due for some negative regression and the Mets hitters were due for some positive regression. Well, unfortunately for the Mets, the negative regression of the pitching staff hit before the positive regression of the hitters has hit. Now, of course, Juan Soto has been lights out, one of the best players in baseball in the month of June. Hitting well over 300 with 11 home runs, I believe, in the month of June. So he's caught fire, but there's not enough offense that this team can consistently find to hold up against a barrage of pitching mishaps, woes, defensive mishaps that the Mets have had over the last handful of the last 2 weeks or so. There's a lot of stuff going on here that simply needs to be straightened out. Now, the one grace that I see in all this, as I mentioned other places, is that this is happening here before the All-Star break and before the trade deadline is passed, which means the Mets actually have time to react. Should this breakdown had this happened, say, in August or early September, you'd be in a whole lot of trouble because then you could really only pull up from your farm system or certain players in certain particular situations. But now the Mets have the freedom. I basically can't see any reason based on where we're at that the Mets are not going to be pursuing at least one high leverage starting pitching arm. Of course, we always know that David Stern is going to be looking to improve the bullpen. And honestly, when you look at the overall picture of how many starting pitchers we've had go down, we've basically lost an entire starting rotation. And again, that's not to say that the Mets are the only team to get hit by the injury bug, because of course the Dodgers have gotten hit by it. But we've now had Montas, Manaea, Canning, Senga, and McGill. Those are five starting pitchers, and maybe McGill doesn't start on a lot of pitching staffs, but the other four, they're probably starting pitchers on 80% of the pitching staffs in the majors, and even Tyler McGill would be probably pitching on the starting staff in 25% of the major league teams, I would guess, if you were on them. The Mets have lost an entire starting pitching staff. And they managed to come out with it with one of the best records in the National League. One of the best records in the National League East was the best record coming into tonight. Um, so there is a lot to take from this in the sense of the Mets don't need to panic because of the cushion that they built. The opposite side is also true, though, that since the cushion has been built, uh, we've used it up. There is no more cushion. And of course, the Mets on their losing streak that they had, they end up dipping a couple games below the Phillies. They were able to make that ground up quickly, but I just don't expect that that's going to be something that the Mets are going to easily be able to do. They're not going to be able to fall behind by 5, 6, 7 games in this division, then be able to make a run. Not that they can't, but it's just not what you want to be seeing as a fan of this team. And so they need to get some things figured out quicker. One of the things that definitely plagues this team is this lack of first inning offense. In the games where they don't score in the first inning, it almost feels like you can turn the game off. And in the games where they do score in the first inning, it almost feels like the game is going to be a win and it's just going to work. And so I, you know, I don't know how to I don't know how to diagnose this team other than the hitting needs to step up now, the way the pitching stepped up in the beginning of the season. Because even if you bring in a couple of arms, it's still going to be a ways before you're going to actually be able to see the results that you're going to want to see. And the Mets can't really they can't afford to fall behind too much. D-Rails, how's it going? Yeah, I don't know. Like the problem is you're pulling too far down. You know the depth is been tested to the full, and until that can be figured out, I don't know. Are all these injuries with the pitching staff, are they just a coincidence? Is there something from the broader perspective that we need to be looking at? But even when the Mets had one of the better pitching staffs in baseball, I was very cautious because like these aren't names that are well proven over a long period of time. And I think that there's something to be said about like, we really should enjoy it when you have pitchers who are overperforming, but also know that that negative regression is almost certainly going to be happening. It's just the way that it goes. Can good players have a bad week or month or even a bad season? Yeah, it's possible, but generally speaking, the cream rises to the top. The best players generally make the adjustments. That's what makes them the best players. And what doesn't make a team the best is when they can't make adjustments, right? And so we also talk about the Dolphins here on this channel. And one of my biggest frustrations being a Dolphins fan is how many teams make adjustments against the Dolphins at halftime and how rare the Dolphins tend to make adjustments at halftime. And so they come out as the same exact team. Meanwhile, the other team comes out like a completely different team. And I feel like this is kind of maybe one of the issues of the Mets starting lineup is that they don't seem to make quick adjustments outside of Soto. Soto seems to be about the only one who can. Sometimes Nimmo, I guess, too. Soto and Nimmo, maybe the two that I see who make the best adjustments to how they actually handle the pitching as it comes to them. And it just does feel. I mean, I'm sure we can look up all the stats and everything like that, but man, it just feels like if Lindor isn't getting on base in the first inning, if the Mets aren't scoring runs in the first inning, it just feels like that game is going to be a difficult, not fun to watch game. And then you're almost like, how many runs can we give up to have a shot at coming back later in the game? That's kind of the question that I end up asking myself. Like, how many runs can the Mets get down and to come back? Yeah, I mean, I think Chavez is definitely going to be one who is going to be talked about. I doubt that the Mets are going to make any sort of move like that during the regular season unless there's a complete tanking, like a complete like fall out of the playoff picture, because it's just not always the way that teams that are doing well something fans want to see, but it's just one of those things you tend to not do when the team is still doing relatively well. And I think the other side of this is too, the Mets are still learning how to be the type of team that gets the best from other teams every night, right? So the Dodgers have lived this now for a couple of years, and up until recently the Braves lived this. And I think really, like in a lot of ways, the Phillies kind of live this. They're used to taking every team's best shot every single night, right? So to the Mets, like this game is just a 3 game set against the Pirates, but to the Pirates, this is their opportunity to show out against a team from a major market. And honestly, all these players here, a lot, I mean, not all, but I would say most of these players for the Pirates are up for grabs at the trade deadline. So a lot of these guys are hoping to be traded to a contender and hoping to get traded, even though they might not tell you that. But from a logical standpoint, right? I'm sure there's a handful that are loyal to Pittsburgh, but the vast majority of them are hoping to get into a place. And so this is their opportunity to show out, just like it is against the Dodgers or against the Phillies. Like when you're a smaller market team and player on a smaller market team, you're going to come out because all you want to do is you want to beat, it's just that rivalry thing. You want to beat the big team. You want to beat the Mets. You want to beat the Yankees. You want to beat the Red Sox. You want to beat the Dodgers. You want to beat the Phillies. And the Mets haven't maybe made that full transition yet to seeing themselves and realizing that they are now one of the big kahunas that's being hunted, and they're going to see the best of every team every single night. And that means they have to play their best every single night. Coulter, how's it going? Absolutely. Hope you are doing well here tonight. Hope you're doing better than the Mets are doing here tonight. So, just as you kind of think through it, I think that's one of the big transitions is, and I think that will come, but it also takes time, right? Like, so to get that swagger that we are the best team and that we will take your best shot and we don't care what your best shot is. We're going to deflect it. We're going to be better than that. We're going to be better than your best shot. But that's one of the things you consistently are seeing with this Mets team is it's almost like they're unprepared to take the best shot from the other team. And so Red Man Mets are trash. Well, I mean, I do think they're on the. I think they've bottomed out. I do think they're on the upswing just in general. And so I do think that they're like this is not the cause for all lost hope. There are plenty of teams that would trade places with the Mets. But part of becoming a winning championship caliber is you have to start to build whatever it's going to look like for your team. And this isn't even always just a 1 year thing. This can kind of be a multi-year thing where you get enough veteran presence of guys who have been there before. And right now, this team has one person who's been there, who's done that with the World Series, and that's Juan Soto. And so I do think that it's gonna come, but they have to fully embrace it too. Like you can't just be as the same year. If you remember the year that the Cubs won the World Series, they had to shed that moniker all the way until they won the World Series. They had to shed the moniker of being the lovable losers that the Cubs are, right? And so they finally had to piece everything together, and they got all the pieces right in the right place. And um, it's a journey of going from being the laughing stock to trying to be a legit contender. Like you just don't get days off, right? You can say this all you want, like that, well, the professionals, they shouldn't do it. But the Dodgers don't get many days off. Occasionally they have a game where their bats go off and they take care of it, but that's because they're on. It's not because the other team quit or got scared of them. There is no level at this level at the Major League Baseball. There's no player out there thinking like, "Oh my goodness, the Dodgers are this big bad team and we can never beat them." That's not how it is. Every team that goes out there says, "Look, we've got our shot at the Dodgers. We're going to play our absolute best," which is how you see things like the Los Angeles Angels go in and sweep the Dodgers, whatever that was, a couple months ago, or 6, 8 weeks ago, whenever that was. Why? Does that mean the Angels are better than the Dodgers? No, but it means that the Angels give their absolute best when they play the Dodgers because of the rivalry. Because I mean, in that case, they're even in the same town area, same market, kind of. I know that's kind of convoluted how that works out there, but like there is no night off. Like you can't just say, "Hey, we're just gonna take the night off," and we know the other team's gonna be too easy and they're not gonna care. No, that's not how that works, and it's certainly not how that works when it's a bottom team or a struggling team like the Pirates are. They're 33-50 playing the Mets. Does that mean the Pirates are better than the Mets because the Mets lost them? No, obviously we know that's not true, But does that mean like the Mets have to buckle up if they want to actually try to genuinely win this series? Yeah, you know, but that is one thing this team does seem to be good at, other than if you ignore the last 2 weeks, is coming back and making those the team wide adjustments. Um, over the long haul, and like they did in the Brave series, after they got behind in that series, they were able to make the comeback and be able to split that series. You know, I think this team is more than capable of being able to do it, but there are there are both personnel problems here. The Mets do not have enough starting pitching, and their bullpen is not that great right now because their bullpen is just getting chewed up, and their bullpen's been taking on too many innings since the very beginning of the year, and all those things, all those cracks are starting to get there. But like I said, the benefit to all this is happening before the All-Star break. This is happening before the trade deadline. So the Mets are going to have the pieces that they need to acquire, because I do not expect this team to be quiet. This team knows, I mean, I think every fan of the Mets knows that if the playoffs started today, we'd be in trouble, right? I don't think there's any Mets fan that says, "Oh yeah, I'm confident with the roster that we're going in with." In fact, there's probably not too many fans of any team in baseball that would say that they're, yeah, I'm clearly confident of everything that we have going on. Um, you know, so there is work to be done, but there is time to get that work done. I would like to see the Mets figure out how to score more runs in the first inning. I don't know if you can really figure out pitching depth, like in getting pitchers to go deeper into games. But it would be nice if the Mets could find one or two, maybe one at the trade deadline, one innings eater pitcher who can just eat the innings, even if he won't give you consistent wins, can give your bullpen a break one day a week. A guy who can consistently go 7 or 8 innings, who can consistently pitch efficiently enough to get through 8 innings with 100, 110 pitches, something like that on a regular basis. That's one thing that I would like to see the Mets look to acquire, in addition to a frontline starting pitcher. It just feels more and more, if this team wants to compete for a World Series, they need to get, first of all, you need to hope that Senga comes back and is his normal self. And in addition, to nursing Clay Holmes through his first season, starting all the way through, and patiently waiting for Montas and Manaea to get back or back to full strength. It feels like this team needs another legit number one, number two starter type to put into this rotation. And it's unfortunate, that Peterson's kind of facing some of the same yips now that McGill was facing as well, with McGill on the injured list. I mean, Peterson's still having a great season, but it is very noticeable that kind of the general drop off, or this negative regression we've been talking about. So I don't know. You can let me know down in the comments below, what would you actually like to see the Mets do in terms of player personnel at the trade deadline? Who would you like to see them acquire? Who would you like to, uh, you know, who would you like to see brought up? Are the Mets going to see, you know, another starting pitcher actually make it from the minors up to the majors? I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. I'd love to kind of hear your thoughts on all of that before we cover the rest of the comments that I missed. Just a special shout out to all the patrons who helped this channel go on. We're going to start a patron challenge, just because it's going live has been taking up too much of my work time, and I need to be working a little bit more, and doing some things. So we're going to do a patron challenge. We're going to try to get back to doing one live a week. And so we're going to try to get back to that. But in addition, every time we can add 10 patrons, we'll add a second live during the games, and when there are 2 games a week. So that's what we're going to work towards that. I might also do some of these recap sort of things as long form videos as opposed to lives as well. We'll see, just because then I can pound those out a little bit faster, and I might be kind of working on some alternate schedule things. I'm testing some stuff out in the background to get that worked. So anyway, patreon.com/MetropoliFins if you want to help support this channel and allow me to bring more and hopefully better content to you as time goes by. Mets lack self-awareness, especially because of Steve Cohen. Steve Cohen is still relatively new in his ownership journey. I saw a stat today that he is spending a larger percentage of the revenue that's coming into the Mets on players and on his team versus anyone else. Like about 90% of the money that the Mets organization is taking in is being paid out to the players. And so he is highly invested in this. Um, and so one of the things that you'll notice is he is not going to be afraid to admit he was wrong or to make adjustments. Right. So early on went with the going with the Verlander Scherzer, go big, bring in these guys, and then that totally blew up and it didn't work. And he was like, okay, you know what? That didn't work. I'm not going to double down on it. I'm not going to try to make it work again. I'm going to start with a different philosophy. And so the Mets are kind of in this in between where their homegrown talent isn't quite there, right? And I think we could all say that for all these guys, no matter who you like and who you don't like of this baby Mets. It's just they're not ready to be handed the keys to the car yet, right? And so for you got people shuffling up and down, of course, Vientos is back and he was DHing today. Beatty's hitting the ball well, but he's been highly inconsistent. Acuna got sent down to the minors. Mauricio got to stay. Jared Young went down to the minors. Mauricio got to stay. But Alvarez is in the minors. And, some Mets fans are like, well, I'm just done with them. Like, what? Yeah, you can be, but that's not really how it works on a major league level. We just got these baby Mets. They just haven't fully. We've seen glimpses of amazing play and great play from some of them, but none of them are the guy. Like none of them are all star caliber, right? None of them are like talents that you're like, oh my goodness, like this is definitely our new leader in 2 or 3 years. There's the potential for a lot of these guys to be great baseball players or very good baseball players, starters in the major leagues, which is still like an amazing accomplishment. But at the same time, there's not one of the younger Mets that I would say, yeah, if the game is on the line, let me put it on their shoulders. There's only three guys, right? Maybe four, maybe five, right? Lindor, Soto, Alonso. You could, maybe Nimmo, maybe McNeil. I think that I would feel comfortable with in a big situation saying like, yeah, if I could have any of those guys come up right now, I'd be pretty good. But the rest of the Mets, they're players who are probably, you know, maybe starters on some teams, bench players on other teams, or some of these young guys who are like again maybe there, but maybe there'd be platoons on other teams. There's not many guys on the Mets outside of the top three or four or five, depending on how far you want to expand. You might say someone else that you like better than me or that you don't like as much as I do. But the point is, it's still a very limited number of players that you can really feel comfortable pulling from and putting them in a big situation. And the baby Mets need time to bloom. And the broader point I'm trying to make here is this organization, what Steve Cohen took over was an absolute dumpster fire. There was just nothing. There are a few prospects, which are our baby Mets. There were a few prospects in the farm system. There was zero depth beyond that top level of prospects. There was just zero long-term strategy. There's just a whole lot of stuff that was completely broken that when Steve Cohen took over. And he's not an expert owner. He's just starting. The one thing that he has that not a lot of owners has is he has the ability to make big financial mistakes without it completely, you know, capsizing the franchise for a long time. And so I think the Mets are on the right trajectory. The problem is Mets fans demand a winner now. Steve Cohen wants a winner now. And it's this team is very good, but they're not great. I almost entitled this stream, "The New York Mets are not a great team." They're a very good team. But they're also highly inconsistent. And I personally am okay with that. I know a lot of Mets fans are not okay with that. I'm okay with it because I know it's the process. The process of becoming a consistently great team is not something that is usually done overnight. And when it is done overnight, it almost always dissipates like right away, right? So the Cubs were a team of irrelevance for years. They win the World Series, and then they kind of disappear. Kansas City Royals, right? The year they beat the Mets in the World Series, they had a good year. Took them a couple years to build up, but then they win the World Series, and then everything just gets disassembled and part of out. Same thing we've seen with the Marlins, right? They win a World Championship and they sell off the entire team. Uh, a lot of Mets fans, because you're like me, you've been waiting for a championship for 40 years. You want to win now. And I certainly do believe that the Mets organization wants to win this year. However, I don't know how much they want to win at the sacrifice of next year or 2 or 3 years down the line. And it'll be very interesting to see what they actually decide to do, because obviously some of the biggest trade pieces that the Mets have are players that we've grown close to. We've been cheering on. We've been rooting their way through the minor leagues, sometimes on a major league roster. But what are the Mets going to do? Like there's only so many roster spots, and this roster is not ready to go and take a World Series as currently composed. They need pitching. They need starting pitching. They need relief pitching. They need one or two guys who can get on way more consistently. um, I think they need a center fielder. Are the Mets going to legitimately, like, would they even consider maybe a second catcher as well? What is Alvarez's future with this team? I don't know, but it doesn't feel like Hayden Sanger is the guy that you'd want to bring with you to the World Series. So the Mets going to look for something else, or are they just going to give Alvarez the time to get some things fixed with his swing? I don't know. There's a lot of pieces, and I would expect that the pieces will be getting in motion soon. I mean, and to truth be told, right, there's been all these little trades and little signings that have been happening. So I don't expect David Stearns to sit back. I expect him, if he finds a guy who's available that matches what he's looking for, he's going to strike quickly. And I would assume very quickly after the All-Star break, I'm just guessing the Mets are going to be active. Now I might end up being completely wrong on that and they stay dormant, but I don't see this team being dormant. I think there's enough pieces out there that the Mets can acquire, and we'll see what they choose to do with all that. I don't know. I don't know if they will choose to take it all, but you know, it'll be interesting to see how the whole thing plays out. So let me know, what pieces do you want to see the Mets take on? Let's see. Redman, I want Francisco Lindor back. I do not like this Francisco Lindor. I want the old Francisco Lindor. Yeah, I mean, but baseball is a game of streaks and slumps. That's what baseball always has been, always will be. It's just some days you're seeing the ball really well, and other days you're not. And sometimes it can be not just days, it can be weeks. Um, what I want to see, I'm not so worried about any one individual person. I just want to see when Pete Alonso has a bad day, that Brett Beatty steps up. When Brett Beatty and Francisco Lindor have a bad day, Mark Vientos and Ronnie Mauricio step up. Like, I don't like seeing all these consistent games where we're scoring 0, 1, or 2 runs. That's to me the bigger, broader danger sign that I see from the offensive side, is that there are games when this offense clicks perfectly and they can put up 5, 6, 7, 8 runs in a flash. And then the very next day, this offense can completely disappear. It's too many streaky players. And the Mets need, obviously, I'm not saying he's available, but they need an Arias guy who's going to get his 2 to 3 hits. And now, of course, part of that's part of Soto's role, but they need more than just Soto. Like, Soto getting on base consistently is not as valuable as if there's runners on base ahead of him. And so, again, Soto hits the home run tonight. It was a 4-0 game at the time. Obviously, we know the game went bad after that. But let's say there were 2 runners on when Soto hits a home run. Then it's a 4-3 game. Who knows what way this goes? Maybe the way that Mendoza uses the bullpen is completely different if it's a closer game. But it just gets so far out of hand so quickly. And, you know, I don't think this team, like, I think they can, but they're just not currently in the mindset of coming back from more than about 3 or 4 runs down. And maybe they just need to have one of those big, 6-run ninth inning games and do that. Like, I do feel like they're pulling out of this little slump that they've been in, but they're still not there. And it's too much inconsistency, and it's time for the hitters to step up when the pitching is struggling, just like the pitcher stepped up in the beginning of the season when the hitting was struggling. And so that's what I would say with all of that. But I would love to let you know, I would love for you to let me know what pieces would you like to do. Yeah, the team is still not harmonizing. They're not clear headed. The faults are not individual. Yeah, and I agree. And like I said, I think Bruce, part of this is the Mets are still growing into the identity of being the team to beat. Now, they're not the best team in the National League, but they are growing into this identity of we're gonna get punched in the mouth every single night. Every single night, they're going to give us our absolute best. Whether it's the Pirates, whether it's the Braves, or the Dodgers, it doesn't matter. Everybody wants to beat the Mets in the same way that everybody wants to beat the Yankees. Everybody wants to beat the Dodgers. And there will be zero mercy on this Mets team. And um, the Mets have to figure this out because no team is going to say, "Oh, we're beating the Mets 4-0. We feel safe. We're gonna play it safe." No, you're going to see teams. They're going to keep tacking on runs because they know the potential for a big inning is there. Everybody knows the Mets can score 4, 5, 6 runs in an inning. So what's a safe lead if you're facing a team that can easily put up 6 runs in an inning? Well, a safe lead is 10 or 12 runs, right? Like that's a safe lead. So I'm not expecting any team to take their foot off the gas against the Mets, just like you wouldn't expect it if you were a Yankees fan. And honestly, if you want to be kind of known as not the little brother of the Yankees anymore, this is what you have to expect. And then you have to be ready for it. And it's almost like the Mets haven't come to fully grasp the fact that I don't want to say enemy, public enemy number one, because that's not really, they're not an enemy in the sense, but it's just like they're one of the big dogs now. They're not they're not a lovable loser underdog story. They're a big dog, and everybody's going to throw their absolute best at them. And if they're not ready, these are Major League Baseball caliber players. You know, Andrew McCutchen probably makes the Hall of Fame. I think he's got a shot. I haven't looked at all his numbers, but the point is, there's not too many players on this Pirates team who you're going to say, oh, you're going to remember their names in 10 or 12 years. That's just not how it's going to be. But every single one of them is a Major League Baseball player who knows how to do what they need to do, and I just think like, yeah, the Mets are going to have to learn what it's like to be living with the expectations and with other teams coming after them. So, but anyway, let me know down in the comments below whether you're watching live or on replay. Who would you like to see the Mets acquire at the trade deadline? Whether it's just general positions, that's more what we were talking about tonight. We can talk specific trade targets. If you want to help support the channel, help us get to doing more lives and more live streams of games, please consider joining the Patreon so we can get that rolling as well. But as always, hit that like, hit that subscribe. This did not go the way the Mets wanted tonight or Mets fans wanted tonight, but they will be back at it again tomorrow. So, will the last person here please turn out the lights? And as always, let's go Mets, baby.